Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Half and Half this Saturday morning. I just can't help but talk about the weather a little. It's so cold in Madison right now. And if you look at the numbers, it doesn't look that cold, but it's really damp and there's a wind chill or something like that. And it's chilly. Um, and when it gets so chilly, I feel like all of us do this and kind of tighten everything up here, but also just kind of everything around our spine. And then we're walking around on ice and we're kind of pulling up out of the ice, and everything just gets like really like this. And hopefully, when we come back inside, we start to melt, but we don't always start to melt when we come back inside. So, I was thinking it would be great to do a little spinal articulation today, which is a very classic Pilates concept. And sometimes I make fun of Scott because he'll say, good old something. He'll say, good old buddy cat, or he'll say, good old Sharon. I don't know anyone named Sharon, but I don't want to offend anyone either, so I'll use the name Sharon. And I always think like nobody wants to be called that, but it's his way of being like, oh, I'm really fond of like this person. They're just so wonderful and so reliable, or this cat. And I've known them for so long and it's so wonderful. And so I would like to present good old spinal articulation, which is it's such a classic Pilates idea. And it is one of the um, really like prime, if there was one thing I had to pick, it would definitely be in the running. But this is what makes Pilates unique and special and makes you feel so good. And Joe Pilates spoke about the health of your spine and the youth of your spine, having to do with its flexibility and mobility and fluidity and strength and all those things. And that if you had a really young spine, then you were a young body. And if you had an old spine, you had an old body, regardless of your years. So being able to get that movement in your spine is really the primary, uh, one of the primary ideas in Pilates. So let's do it. Let's play around with that. Um, and let's start standing, although we'll do definitely get to the mat pretty quickly, but let's start with a standing roll down. And one of the reasons that's useful is gravity does some of the work for you. As you roll forward, you can let the spine release into gravity. At the same time, what often happens for us when we just kind of like roll down is we have a couple places in our spine that maybe bend really easily, and to other places in our spine that are still stuck in the cold outside, right? Like are still really stiff. So you have 24 vertebrae. You have your sacrum, you have your tailbone, you have your skull. And so you have 26 or more joints, about 26, somewhere in there, that could articulate. And yet, how many actually articulate when you do a roll down, right? Like maybe we do 1, 2, and we're pretty good. And then like 3, 4, 5, and 6 all go together. And then, we get down another few that are good. And then we have a big chunk that goes together. I know you know this feeling. So we're going to visualize a little. We're going to do a little hands-on to see if we can figure that out. But start with your hands up and your fingers. I like to use just my fingers to get right in the little notch in the back of the skull, where the skull meets the very top vertebra, these very top two cervical vertebra, the atlas and the axis up here, and feeling like kind of in that divot. And you can use your fingers to kind of push and move your skull a little bit, but mostly just to wake up that part of your spine. You can go down a little bit to a couple vertebra, the little spinous processes, the bony part of the vertebra back here on your neck on the next view, and then a couple more down. And then you'll hit kind of a big bony one. For most of us, there's one right about at the top of the rib cage that's pretty bony. That's the end of your cervical spine there. That's your last one. So give yourself some awareness back here of those vertebrae and the muscles around it. And then think of starting like right at the top of nodding your head, just nodding your head. barely nodding your head. And as you do it, your chin, you might even think of your chin kind of floating back as it goes down. That a lot of times we pull everything forward to start with the neck, but to get those very upper vertebra, you drop the chin as it starts to come down. And imagine you could open the space in all those vertebrae in your neck. Might feel like you have a little bit of a double chin. That's okay. As you feel that slight double chin, imagine you could open the back of your throat. If you're a singer, if you've ever done any singing, they talk about like finding your soft palate lifted or feeling kind of a yawn sensation. This is a kind of similar sensation, opening the back of the throat. And you might already be starting to feel your upper back and the vertebra between your shoulder blades and rolling down through that. I have my hand right on my chest, so I'm reminding my chest to relax so that my upper back can bend and move. If my chest is really stiff, I'm not going to be able to bend through my upper back. So really soft chest. Now I've gotten through my head, neck, and upper back. I'm going to bend my knees a pretty good amount here. And that's going to help me get into the mid back more easily for complicated reasons I won't go into. Having your knees pretty bent helps the lower part of the rib cage open and the upper part of the lower back. So if you're, flexible enough to reach around to your back ribs and touch them, if that's comfortable, go ahead and reach around to your mid back and imagine opening right where your lower ribs are. Maybe you breathe into that space. Your chest is still soft. The back of the neck is open. You have a little bit of a double chin. And then maybe use your fingers to give you a little more feedback through your lower back, rolling through that space. And then you start to move a little more down through your sacrum and tailbone. And then at a certain point, it's your hip joint, right? Your pelvis is going to fold forward. That's your hip joint moving. Letting your whole spine roll all the way down till you're upside down. And I've still got my knees bent. Even if I know it's kind of tempting to say like, oh, I want to stretch the hamstrings a lot. I'm going to stretch the legs. For what we're doing with the spine, that's going to make you less likely to release your spine. If you really push on the hamstrings, it's going to be harder to release your spine. So don't worry about the hamstrings. Keep your knees pretty bent. Just try to relax your spine forward. And then reach your hands around again to hold the back of your pelvis. That's where your sacrum is, right in the center of the back of your pelvis. Bend your knees a little more even, like you're sitting down into a chair. And then just kind of press your pelvis down. Imagine your sacrum going down, your tailbone going down. That starts to bring your pelvis back into place on your thighs. Once you feel the pelvis is upright, then we start lower back vertebra, unrolling those vertebra. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vertebrae in your lower back. That was very Sesame Street for you. And then starting to work through the thoracic, the mid back. And then the upper thoracic, upper back between your shoulder blades. I'm starting to feel that open back of the throat, kind of double chin, opening the neck, unrolling through the neck, and then that final just no more nodding the head. That was a very big nod of the head, wasn't it? So play with it a little bit on your own timing. If it works better for you to flow a little more and move a little more, you can do that. If you want to go super slow and put your hands on your back and feel that, you can do that. I'm going to be maybe somewhere in between. So you take whatever time works for you to feel this Visualize this movement in the spine, feel this movement in the spine. Really try to think segment by segment. Get through the lower back before you let the pelvis move. Get through the upper back before you go to the mid back, all that. And keep breathing, keep bending your knees. And the next thing we'll do is on the floor. So if you were going super slowly and you're just upside down right now, well, then transition from there. If you're back up, let's transition from here. Work your way down to your hands and knees, however you like. Now we're going to kind of do that same thing again here in kind of a cat-cow position. So a lot of times we do cat-cow and we go and then the other way, and we do a whole body, whole spine movement. We're thinking about maybe a particular part of our back, maybe our upper back or lower back. And we're often thinking like, ooh, I'd love this stretch, right? Isn't that what you think a lot of times when you do cat-cow? Like, oh, that feels good, right? That sort of feeling, just like a cat would do. And then sometimes if you've done some Pilates, maybe you're not thinking about that stretch, but you're thinking about your abdominals or something like that. Today, we're going to think about spinal articulation, and we're going to do it less whole body. So I'm going to start in my parallel, kind of flat back position of the spine. And then I'm going to start just at the tailbone. I'm going to think I could just move my tailbone into that position and drop it towards the floor. And then I'm going to feel my pelvis start to move. And then I'm going to start to feel my lower back get into the position. Then I'm going to start to feel my mid back, and then my upper back, and then my neck and my head. And I'm going to try that same thing in the other direction. So I'm in my cat position. I'm going to leave my upper body where it is and just try to reach my tail up, and then feel how my pelvis moves, and then feel it ripple through the lower back, and then ripple through the mid back, ripple through the upper back, and then all the way out. I'm looking forward. So if I had like a rein or something, right? Like a whip, not that I do that much, maybe a ribbon or something, how it would sort of ripple like that. That's what I'm doing with my spine. So starting from the tailbone again and feeling that work through, resisting with the upper part until it's the upper part's turn. And then coming back the other way, starting from the tail, lower back, rib, upper back, neck, head. Now, see what it's like to start from the other end. So the head, there's that nod. I'll leave my pelvis in place. Let my neck move. Let my upper back move. Lower back, pelvis, tailbone. And same thing, going the other direction, starting with the head. Now, I'm not going quite as slowly as I was before because you can get too tense about it. So I'm taking that feeling of feeling the ripple, maybe not being super perfect and super exact, but still trying to feel a lot of articulation. So play with it on your own. Do you like starting with the tail? Do you like starting with the head? You get to choose, or you could just alternate. And use it as a way to open the spine, but also use it kind of like a diagnostic. Just to notice, like, oh yeah, I just skipped over that part. Huh, that must be a really stiff part. And then you could slow down there for a moment and see if you could get a little more movement there. And then the next time you're in a up or down position, either way, take a flat back, come back to child's pose and take a couple breaths there. And notice in child's pose, how does it feel in your spine? Just observe. What do things feel like along your spine, from your skull all the way down to your tailbone? Do you have a little more awareness there? And then come up to sitting. Okay, so great spinal articulation exercise, in my opinion, is shoulder bridge. I think that's another one where you can really feel the spinal articulation. And it's a little tricky because sometimes this is taught as a glute strengthening exercise, and that's the primary focus. And so the primary focus is just to lift your pelvis and come back down. And that's not about spinal articulation. That's about strengthening your glutes, right? That's another thing. So we're going to take that basic action, we're going to make it about spinal articulation, which is what it's about in Pilates when you do shoulder bridge. So same thing you just did, but now your legs have to work a little more. Your triceps have to work a little more. We're going to start from the tailbone and feel the tailbone move. Maybe just do a little bit with the tailbone a few times. Just tailbone floats up and that tips my pelvis a little, and then tailbone relaxes and my pelvis goes back to place. As my tailbone floats up, I'm rolling over my sacrum. And then as my tailbone releases, I'm rolling the other direction of my sacrum. Yeah. And then this time, take it a little more. Tailbone, pelvis, feel how the feet press, and then 5 lower back vertebra. Could you imagine 5 little movements between all those lower back vertebra? Your ribs are still on the floor, totally. We've just gotten the lower back vertebra up. And then place the lower back vertebra down. 5 little movements. Sacrum / pelvis. And then the tailbone just kind of relaxes. And same thing again, tailbone has a little movement. I'm not really squeezing the tailbone, I'm just imagining it floating up, rolling over the sacrum. 5 quick little movements in the lower back. Now let's go a little more to that lower part of the rib cage feeling. So I'm going to leave my chest and my upper back in place, but I'm just going to feel maybe 6 of the rib cage vertebra, 6 little movements. And then 6 little movements down. And then 5 lower back vertebra movements. And then sacrum and the tail just relaxes. So I think you know what's next. Tail floats up, pelvis articulating through the lower back, articulating through the mid back, the lower part of the rib cage. And then you keep moving through the upper back until you really feel it's your shoulders that are kind of your balance point. So you don't really get the whole rib cage vertebra off the floor. The kind of maybe upper couple vertebra are still on the floor. And then just notice what it's like in your neck. Are you tensing up like you're out in the cold, or can you still feel the back of your throat open and your neck movable, even though it's not moving? Upper back vertebra come down, mid back vertebra come down, lower back vertebra. Now, same thing we did a moment ago. Play with it a little bit on your own. Keep breathing. Observe how things feel. Pause if it's helpful. And like dive in a little deeper. And once you come down this time, we'll stay there. So it's not to rush you. Whenever you do get down, just kind of hang out there for a moment and breathe. And again, notice how things feel through the spine, how your breath is moving along your spine. And then once you finish that, as you're ready, bring yourself up to sitting. Okay, so things are getting harder, right? The standing, we let gravity do it. Hands and knees, we had to work a little more to get the spine moving, but still mostly your hands and knees were holding you. That bridge, a little more work in the legs to hold the pelvis, to control it. And maybe you know what's coming already, the roll up. So this is one of the, maybe the most challenging way to do it in relation to gravity for most of us, to not grab in the spine. But it's the same thing. Your body knows how to do it. It's done it a few different ways now. That mobility exists. The strength probably isn't far away, especially if you do a modified version where your arms help you. But the coordination, how do I make it happen? If I'm so used to stiffening my spine to roll up and down, it's a relearning for sure of a pattern. So one of the reasons I am such a fan of holding on to your legs as you go is it always helps focus in on creating better spinal mobility. Because my arms are holding the weight of my body, I can take a moment, pause, and find a little more ease in my spine. If I have a stiff spine and I immediately challenge myself to hold a very difficult position in relation to gravity, I'm going to use the strength I have. And the strength I have is that kind of stiffening of the spine. So if I want to change that, then I give myself a little bit of help. I let my arms hold my legs. Feels a little different. It's kind of novel in the body. The body has a little bit of space to feel what you felt in the other exercises. And, you know, for a lot of us, it is that kind of lower rib cage, mid back place, but it's also your lower back, it's also your neck, it's anywhere in there. So knees are bent, hands are holding your legs, arms are on, my biceps are working, I can feel them, with a sense of letting the spine be a little more fluid. And once I have that release in the spine, once I have that fluidity in my spine, then I could think of the abdominals coming on. I want to get the mobility first before I start adding in the abdominal work. And just lower yourself down to wherever you feel you can keep this awareness and this openness in your spine. And then as you come up, new challenge, it's going to want to stiffen, right? Can you use your arms to help you? Use your abdominals to help you so that your spine can remain open. And I really pull with my arms, right? Like I had a rope and I was pulling myself up out of the water. All these images are not things I ever do, but it seems right when I see people do that in the movies. So rounding back, holding your legs are the rope, and your arms are going to slowly walk down the legs, holding on, really holding yourself so your spine can release. Let the belly add in and stop when you need to. Transition, other direction. Now I got to use the arms to really pull me up. One more like that on your own time. Variation on that same thing. One leg rolling up and down, knee bent, hands hold the back of your leg. Round spine, and as you round your spine, think about that cat you did earlier. Tailbone, pelvis, lower back, mid back, upper back, neck. Everything gets a little bit of movement in rounding your spine. Feel your leg pressing a little forward into your hands so your arms can work again. And then rolling down. The tailbone finds its place on the mat. The sacrum then finds its place. The lower back moves one vertebra at a time to unroll. Mid back, upper back, neck and head. And thinking of that same thing on the way up, head and neck, upper back. Start pressing the back of the leg so you can get through the mid back. Then you can get through the lower back. And coming up. One more. And then switching to the other side. And I'll say again, this is also just a place to diagnose and observe, right? So maybe you think, okay, I want to get through 26 segments and I'm getting through about 7 on a good day. But today, I just felt myself get through 10. So you get 3 more vertebra mobilized, great. You've still got a little more work to do over the next, year or so to try to get those other ones moving. But observe what's stiff first, and then observe the change. You don't have to get to perfect today. Just get to a little better. One more time. Okay, so let's do our final one for me. Coming over onto your hands and feet, back where we were at the beginning, body hanging forward, knees bent, head released, back of the neck open. Drop your tail as you bend your knees and feel your spine unroll, stacking one vertebra at a time. Back up, all the way to standing. So hopefully that already feels better. It feels pretty good to me to have just a little more movement through there. So let's see what where Scott takes us.
Right here. Good morning, everybody. So let's continue that theme and see how some of those layers are embedded within a yoga sun salutation. So to begin, have your feet about hip width apart. You remember immediately at the outset how you articulated your spine, you created the double chin, and mobilized your spine from top to bottom. So let's do that again, and at your own pace. Basically just doing the reverse of what you just did in coming up, and then ending up with your head hanging and your fingertips on the floor. So if you remember then what you did in the hands and knees and how you worked on articulating the spine, and you explored initiating from your head. So now bring your head forward and let that movement ripple down your spine. And here we are in yoga, what we might call gorilla. Then from gorilla, articulating your spine to fold again. And just a few moments ago, how you came up from folded with Collette. So now the same exact thing, articulating your lumbar vertebra, thoracic, cervical. Now we're going to add something in. Take your arms up, look up, and then arms back down. So there's a lot of spinal mobilization embedded within each and every sun salutation. So let's add in some breathing and see if you can get that feeling of how you've mobilized your spine now a little bit more dynamically. So let's begin with an inhale. Exhale, arms to the side, mobilize your spine into extension. And then inhale, folding. Start from your head, neck, upper back, lumbar, fingertips to the floor. Let's pause here for a breath or two. Just like you explored in cat-cow, just like we did a few moments ago. With the next exhale, mobilize your spine as you move into gorilla. Inhale, mobilize your spine as you fold. And then exhale, mobilize your whole spine as you come up. All the way up. And now let's do that same thing a little bit faster. Begin with an inhale. Exhale, arms up. Inhale, folding. Exhale, gorilla. Inhale, folding. Exhale all the way up. Inhale, arms down. How's that feel? So let's make our way to the floor, and we're going to take a look at mobilizing the spine, in doing so and twisting. So let's put aside all style points and head to the floor. And if sitting on the floor is uncomfortable, you could certainly do this sitting in a chair as well. You could sit up on a blanket or a bolster if you'd like. So we're going to spend a little bit more focused time on the very uppermost part of the neck. So you've already done a little bit of that. Remember that cue of to sort of create a double chin? And see if you can feel that movement not happening in the lower part of your neck, but in the upper part of your neck. The part of your neck that's pretty much right where your ears are. A little nod down, back up, nod, up. And I just have my fingers here as reminders to show you. You don't have to have your fingertips up here, but see if you can make this head movement from pretty much up where your ears are. All right. So now making a movement from pretty much that same place, now a little turn side to side. Someone asked me, they say, how do you feel about 10 degrees below with a lot of wind? And I'd probably shake my head and say, not my favorite. A lot of times this movement comes from really low in the spine because the upper spine, the upper neck in particular, is pretty locked up. So see if you can move not from the easiest place to move. Right beneath your ears where so many people are locked up. All right, now let that movement trail off. And now put those two movements together, making little infinity signs with your nose. And let your head roll around. And make sure you go the other direction. I remember I saw Ray Charles in concert once when I was a young man, and his upper spine was so free. At the time, I didn't know what I was seeing. I just knew I was watching something very special. It was only much later that I could identify the freedom in his body, probably related to the beauty of his art. All right. How's that feeling? So now what we're going to do is work on twisting all the upper vertebra down to your belly, but not including your belly. I like to call this the trickle down twist. So we're going to turn first to the right. Start with your head and see if you can feel each vertebra sequentially contributing. Now, each vertebra can't rotate all that far, but when each vertebra contributes, head turning, neck turning, shoulders turning, upper chest turning, they sum together to create a substantive twisting movement. Let's take a few breaths right here. So notice how your belly still faces straight forward. And then unwinding your upper back and neck, back to the front. Then trickle down twist, second side. Start with your head, neck vertebra, upper back vertebra. Everything twisting but the lower back. So to accomplish that, keep your lower ribs knit to your belly. And a few breaths here. And turning back toward the front. To get that feeling of what it feels like to generate movement in your neck and your upper back, but not in your lower back. So let's make our way back up to our feet. Let's go ahead and use intermediate step here. yoga pose, head down dog. And if head down dog's unfamiliar, so start by letting your heels be lifted, your knees bent. And do you see that wall back there? Take your butt toward that wall. Let that decompress your spine, especially let your head hang to contribute to that decompressing of your spine. And a couple more breaths here. And exhale, step your feet forward. Here's gorilla. Inhale, folding. Exhale, articulating your spine up. I know back in the day in yoga, we did all these things with a flat spine. Think of all those opportunities missed to keep youthful mobility in the spine. So I like to now come up, articulating my spine, fold down, articulating my spine to keep that youthful mobility in my spine. So now let's step feet wide apart. Turn your left foot in and then your right foot out. And then with the exhale, bend your ankle, your hip, and your knee. And then with the inhale, come up. Let's do a couple more like that. Exhale, bend. Inhale, straighten. The next time that knee in the bend position, let's pause there for a spell. Then with the next exhale, tip your hips. Not too far. Bring your hand to your knee, other hand to your hip. And then notice where your belly is facing right now. So in a moment, we're going to keep belly facing right where it is and work on that twist that includes neck and upper back. All right, so next step is to swing your arm forward and through, and then looking inside your armpit, just like we did in the seated, mobilizing your cervical spine, your thoracic spine. Couple breaths here. Come up with the inhale and turning back to the front. So you might be wondering, why are we not turning in the lumbar spine? Because the shape of the lumbar vertebra, the bones themselves, really aren't designed to rotate all that much. So when we twist and try and do so from the lower back, it's not that great for the health of the lower back. And then there's an opportunity missed in the upper back where so many people are stiff. So this technique here is about extracting the maximum benefit with the minimum risk of injury. Let's take a look at the other side. Turn your right foot in, left foot out. Exhale, bend your knee, hip and ankle. Inhale, straighten. Exhale. Inhale. Let's do a few more. So these kind of side-to-side movements, almost all of us can benefit from. Because whether you like to bike, or walk, or hike, ski, or snowshoe, most of what we do is front to back. And most of how we get injured, especially this time of year, slipping, tends to happen side to side. So we're training our body to be responsive in these coronal plane movements. The next time your knee is bent, let's pause there. Pause here for a deep inhale. Exhale, tip your hips like the first side, not going super far. Hand to knee, other hand to hip. And then cataloging, where is your belly facing right now? And keeping that orientation as you take your upper arm forward and through. And then inside your armpit, check out the ceiling. mobilizing the places that tend to be the least mobile, which for a lot of us is upper back and neck. And inhale, come up, turn back to the front, and then stepping your feet together. So now let's revisit something that is so beneficial. You probably heard me say revisit. I'm going to go back to the shoulder bridge. It's so good, let's do it again. So big deep inhale. Exhale, arms up. Inhale, mobilizing, folding. Exhale, gorilla, mobilizing. Inhale, stepping back. Good old head down dog. Good old head down dog. And exhale, coming down. And making your way onto your back. So you got some really great instruction on how to mobilize your spine here. So I don't really have anything to add to that other than let's do it a couple more times. So just like you did a few moments ago, articulate your lowest spine, lumbar segments, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's pause here. So what comes next is your thoracolumbar junction, your lowest ribs. And where a lot of people, their spine is pretty stuck. So we're going to go really slowly here. And thoracic segments 12, 11, 10, 9, and 8. You feel some movement there? If you did, better than I was even a few years ago. So now the rest of the upper back, thoracic spine, lifting up piece by piece. Alrighty, so let's come down to the same protocol. So most people coming down, there's some semblance of mobility, these first few thoracic vertebrae. And then the lower thoracic, things get pretty bound up. So we're going to go slowly again. And then the lumbar. Oh, there we are, back on the floor. How was that? Now let's use a full breath cycle to come up. Inhale, exhale to come up. Inhale, lower back comes up. Exhale, thoracolumbar junction and thoracic spine comes up. Let's pause up here for a full breath cycle. Inhale, exhale. And now inhale, exhale to come down. All right. So now let's turn away from the spine, not like completely forget about what we did in the spine, and now do a little bit of work in the hips that will probably help free up your spine. So we're going to end up lifted up again. We're going to use an inhale, exhale to do so, just like we did a few moments ago. So let's end up hips up in the air. All right. Hips up in the air. Hips comfortably high up as you comfortably can. All right, so here's a little trick. I think a lot of you know it. How do you get your hips higher? Lift your heels up. If you have big feet like I do, you lift your heels up, your hips come up like a foot higher. Now, see if you can keep your hips this high up as you slowly reach your heels down. Slowly descending without dropping your hips. Slowly descending, still descending. once you feel your heels on the floor, let's take a few deep breaths here. And then inhale, exhale to come down. All right. So now coming back up to sitting. Remember how we were cross legs before? Cross your legs the other way. Remember how we did little figure eights? Let's do little figure eights. So in my opinion and my experience, freeing the upper part of the spine, right where the neck meets the skull, is almost like having the key to a padlock. If you have the key to the lock opens effortlessly. If you've misplaced the key to the lock, maybe you have to get out a saw or a torch. Pretty hard to get that lock to open. So what we're doing right here, mobilizing the very highest part of the spine, to me is like the key that unlocks most of the rest of the spine. All right, so let's let those movements trail off. We're going to turn to the right. Remember, I'm mirror image to you. And we're going to go kind of slowly, and I'm going to leave quiet space for you to bring awareness to each segment, cervical and thoracic, ending up with that left hand coming across. All right, so just like you're doing your own home practice. Two deep breaths over here. And then come on back in toward the front. So to me, that's kind of the secret sauce. So in yoga, we got so into doing back bends, ostensibly to free the spine up. It does to an extent. But we kind of neglected twisting and how incredibly powerful twisting is, and oftentimes gentler and more accessible to mobilize the spine as much, if not more, than those deep back bends. So loose neck, and now twisting to your left, to the other side. So when the job calls for a tack hammer, probably best not to get out the sledgehammer. And most of the time, mobilizing the spine, regaining youthful flexibility, is a tack hammer situation that so often we bring out the sledgehammer to try and accomplish. And then coming back toward the middle. How was that? All right, so now we're going to fold forward. Take your feet out in front of you. And then remember how you folded over before? We're going to do the same folding over you did with Collette, except now in seated. So starting with your head, cervical spine, thoracic spine, lumbar spine, then your hips. Now use your breathing to contribute to freeing your spine. Direct your breath into your central channel. And then rolling up the opposite of how you entered. Bring your pelvis to vertical, then stacking your lumbar segments in the vertical, then your thoracic segments in the vertical, and then your cervical segments in the vertical. All right. So a little spine mobilization work. Really glad that you could join us here today. We do this free class every Saturday. Please tell your friends. If you have not had a chance to subscribe to our YouTube channel, it's in that blue box right below. Excuse me, not blue, it's red. And if you get a chance, if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel, it helps us out quite a bit. And we have another program coming up, like in 15 minutes or so. Collette and I are going to talk about aging and resiliently doing it and joyfully in your body. And it's free and it's open to the public. And I think Collette is going to put that URL in the chat. Email, okay. And so email address, and if you'd like to join us, it's a online dialogue in Zoom, and we'd love to see you there. So thanks so much for being here, and let's do this again really soon. Any comments, questions in the chat? Maybe you'll see you in a few minutes.